Hi everyone, Becky Ivory here. We're going to be talking today about Chapter 3 in the book that we're studying, The Intuitive Eating, a Revolutionary Program That Works, by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Reich. I'm not sure how to say their names exactly, but this is a kind of very famous book that is used by many therapists and a lot of professionals who help people to overcome eating disorders and to get out of the dieting eating disorder mentality. And we use this in From Food to Faith to help us understand what intuitive eating is. Now, there's other programs that use the phrase intuitive eating because this is being caught on as something that is a very true principle that we have to get out of dieting and learn to trust our bodies again. So I would define intuitive eating as learning to listen to your own body, your own internal cues that God created, and be able to trust that, be able to trust your body, be able to trust yourself, rather than relying on something outside of yourself to tell you how much to eat or when to eat or what to eat. And that's what diets do. They give you a certain limited number of choices that you can make on what you can eat, when you can eat it, how much you can eat, etc. And we want to start learning to trust ourselves again. So in Chapter 3, it gives a great overview of the principles of intuitive eating. And in this book, they divide it into 10 principles. And that's what I want to discuss with you today, and just make sure that you understand these 10 principles, because this is what we're going to be working on accomplishing as far as the physical part of how we're going to change our eating. And we also, of course, are going to look at the emotional and the spiritual aspects of what keeps us from doing that, what gets in the way, and how we can kind of solve those things to help us find greater peace with food. So let's just start at the beginning of Chapter 3. You know, there's an intro. I'm going to be glancing at some notes over here. I don't want to forget anything, because these points are so important to understand. There's a great quote in the intro. It says, "Only when you vow to discard dieting and replace it with a commitment to intuitive eating will you be released from the prison of yo-yo weight fluctuations and food obsessions." I believe that to be true. That's been true with me, because dieting is always that promise of a quick fix. It's always that if I just can restrict for so long, then I can get what I want. But the truth is, the more we restrict, the more we yo-yo back the other direction, or the way I like to say it is pendulum, right? If we pull the pendulum this far back over here, then it's eventually going to swing back the other direction just as far. And we end up dieting and binging and dieting and binging and never finding a normal, healthy relationship with food and with our bodies. So our goal is to find a healthy relationship with our bodies, with ourselves, with our God, with our Heavenly Father, and getting this food fight out of the way, this war with food that we have been struggling with for so many years. So I agree with that. And, you know, there's a lot of comments in this book from clients who tell you what it's been like for them, but all of them say that the most significant achievement was not weight loss or any of that stuff, but a healthy relationship with food and with their bodies. And so I know some of you cannot even imagine having a healthy relationship with your body, not hating your body anymore, and being able to have a normal relationship with food, but it is possible. And it's actually not that far away if you're committed to this way of doing things. Now, another thing is that a focus on weight loss has to be put on the back burner, right? That is the hardest thing. I couldn't do that for about 20 years after I discovered intuitive eating. It took me 20 more years to be able to be willing to start trying it, because I just could not imagine putting weight loss on the back burner. But the problem is, when we're only focused on weight loss, it perpetuates that mentality, that diet mentality, that I'm not good enough unless I'm a certain weight. And it just pushes us further and further away. Like I said, in those 20 years, I dieted my way up. Let's see, from that point, it was about another 80 pounds from there. And I was already heavy at that point and not feeling well. So in the book, it says, if your current weight has resulted from being out of touch with your internal wisdom about eating, and as a result of tuning back into this wisdom, weight loss occurs, so be it, right? If, however, you're already maintaining your set point weight through a process of restricting, overeating, restricting, and so forth, then it's especially important to put weight loss on the back burner. So what they're saying is, if you're overweight, or if your weight that you currently are at now has come from constantly being out of touch with your body's wisdom, its cues that it's giving you about being hungry and full, and you're constantly eating past that level of satisfaction, physical satisfaction, then your body has put on extra weight because it has to do something with those extra calories. And so they're saying, once you stop doing that, once you stop eating past full all the time, your body will probably naturally start to come down because it's not being given extra calories. That just makes sense, right? And they're saying, so if that happens, great, but you can't have that be the focus of what we're doing right now. And you'll see in the principles that nutrition is important, but we deal with that later after we have come to develop a healthier mindset about food. So principle 1 is reject the diet mentality, okay? It actually says to get angry at the diet mentality, which is interesting to me because I'm not really a proponent of being angry. I don't think that being angry is very helpful, but I do understand what they're saying. They're saying kind of build up some courage to stand up to the world's mentality that your weight is everything, that your weight is your worth, that if you are not a certain size or a certain shape, or you can't fit into the right brand of jeans, that there's something inferior with you. And you kind of have to reject that and say, you know what, I'm tired of that message. I'm not going to buy into it anymore. And they also say that, you know, dieting is the quickest shortcut to a healthy relationship with food. That's found on page 22. And I believe that to be true, because the minute you begin dieting, you're actually saying, I don't trust my body anymore. My body has gone the opposite direction of where I want to go, and I don't trust it anymore. So I'm going to trust some outside program. And what we're really trying to say is, no, learn to listen to yourself. Your body knows what it needs and how much it needs, but you have to learn to be in tune with that, and you have to learn to honor that. And so we want to make sure that we reject the idea that outside forces have to be the one to tell you what to do. And you want to learn to start trusting yourself again. So that's principle 1, just reject the diet mentality. That's easier said than done. Like I said, it took me 20 years past the time when I found this program for me to actually do it. And even during that time, I met with counselors and things who are working with me having an eating disorder and with other people who had eating disorders, and they were all promoting this intuitive eating, and I just couldn't let go of the need to be a certain size. And so it took me a lot longer than it should have. Now, principle 2 is one that we talk about a lot: honor your hunger. It's as simple as that. And you'd be amazed how hard it is for some people to do. Just means you get hungry, eat. It's that simple. If you get hungry, eat. And yet diets tell you, if you get hungry, wait longer and you'll lose more weight. Or, you know, only eat at the moments we tell you to, no matter how hungry you get between, or drink some diet soda to put it off. But studies have shown over and over that when we do that, our metabolisms slow down. And there's some great studies that we'll talk about in our program, and as we go through our discussions, that will show you it's been proven over and over again that when we ignore our hunger, our body rebels by holding on to more calories. The metabolism slows down and it will not burn calories as quickly because it thinks you're starving it, and you are. So honor your hunger. Make sure that when you're hungry, you actually eat. They give an example of a doctor who, you know, doctors are very, very busy and they have long schedules. And this doctor would be ravenous all the time, busy doing patients and operations or whatever. And then by the time he'd get a chance to break, he would just eat tons and tons of food and overeat and feel miserable. And he was carrying around extra weight and was tired all the time and stuff. As soon as he learned that he had to stop when he was hungry and make those few minutes for himself to honor his hunger, everything changed for him. He said his energy started to go up. He wasn't so exhausted. He wasn't so snappy and tired. He was patient with his patients, and no longer had to struggle with his weight after that. It was a really good example. So principle number 2, just honor your hunger. If you're hungry, eat. Principle number 3 is make peace with food. Now that sounds wonderful. There's a little bit that goes into that, right? Making peace with food. But what they're talking about is give yourself permission to eat. Oftentimes we feel like we don't even deserve to eat. I know that being overweight myself has made me feel many times like I didn't deserve to eat, especially if it was something that was decadent or high in calories, that people were watching you and judging you. But the truth is, everybody has to eat. It doesn't matter what size you are. Give yourself permission to eat and stop the food fight, right? Avoid feelings of deprivation that build into uncontrollable cravings. That's what diets create. As soon as they start saying, well, you can only have this on Saturdays, or you can no longer have any sugar or gluten or whatever it is that they're throwing at you, it creates feelings of deprivation. And those usually lead to uncontrollable cravings that end up in binging. So we want to avoid that. And the example in the book that they give is a waitress that they dealt with who worked in a really great restaurant, had a lot of decadent food, and yet she wouldn't allow herself to ever eat the decadent food because she felt like, she's on a diet, she can't eat that. And yet she would think about it when she got home. She would feel deprived. She would be eating, grazing on other things, trying to satisfy this hunger for good food when she was eating, not very satisfying food to take care of it. As soon as she began the intuitive eating process and learning that she could choose food that she really liked, she could have food from the restaurant. She could eat it when she was hungry. She could enjoy every bite, and then she could stop when she had enough. She no longer craved it all the time, and she was satisfied with her food, and she just didn't have that drive to eat it anymore. So kind of amazing. So now she allows herself to eat whatever she wants and doesn't ever feel driven to eat when she doesn't need to. So that's the third principle. Just make peace with food. Principle number 4 is challenge the food police. Now, if you're here, you probably know what the food police are. The food police are those voices in your head that try to tell you that you're good if you eat certain things like salad or grilled chicken or fish, and you're bad if you eat chocolate cake or cookies or butter or whatever it is that your diet brain has taught you to believe. The truth is, food is just food, and we have to stop making it a moral issue, right? It's not good, it's not bad. Think about it. Whose voice do you hear when you start hearing about, oh, you shouldn't eat that, right? Don't eat that. You really shouldn't eat that. Is it your mother's voice? Is it your coach, your old coach's voice? Is it your spouse's voice? Whose voice is that? But somewhere in your own voice, you need to start rejecting that and saying, yeah, no, I can eat whatever I want. In that moment, when I hear that voice, what I like to say to myself in my own head is, food isn't good or bad. Food is just food. I love all kinds of food, and I can eat whatever I want. And that tends to take away that, good, bad judgment, or that need to always be wanting something I shouldn't have, right? The example that they gave was of a woman named Linda who used to be on the track team, and she could still hear her coach's voice and her mom's voice constantly telling her that she needed to lose more weight in order to be a better runner and how much she should eat, et cetera, et cetera. And she was finally able to reject those voices and just kind of take care of herself. Principle 5 is to feel your fullness. Now that is tough. That can be tough for some people. And so you want to listen for the body signals that tell you that you're no longer hungry. That's it. You've decided you're hungry, you eat, you enjoy it, but then you actually have to pay attention to when you're not hungry anymore. Sometimes we like the taste so much that we want to ignore those signals, but it's important that you feel your fullness. Observe the signs that show that you're comfortably full, and just pause, right? In the middle of a meal or a snack, just pause for a second and just ask yourself, how does the food taste? Does it still taste as good as when you started? And what's your current fullness level, right? So if I'm, getting comfortably full, I should know that. I should be aware of that. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to stop eating. It's totally up to you. That is in your hands. You have permission to eat when you want, whatever you want. But at least be aware of it, that you've gotten to a point where you're physically full. Now, here's a good question to ask yourself. How do you interpret, eat until you're no longer hungry versus eat until you're comfortably full? I struggled with that for a while. For me, no longer hungry meant just the hunger pains went away, but I didn't really feel satisfied. And so when I stopped at that point, what I found is I was hungry pretty quickly afterwards. And I never really truly felt satisfied. As I experimented with that, I found that if I ate a couple more bites until what felt to me like comfortably full, then I was more satisfied and I didn't feel a need to come back and eat so often. So there's no right or wrong way to interpret this. You're going to hear it said a few different ways. Whether you eat until you're no longer hungry or comfortably full, satisfied, you're going to have to experiment with that. And each meal that you try it on is going to feel different, right? You're going to have different levels of satisfaction, and you'll decide for yourself what point you feel comfortable and where you know you'll be happiest when you stop. So it's just a matter of being in tune. Now, the example on this story was about Jackie, right? The self-proclaimed party girl. She liked to go with her friends all the time and go out to eat and do things on the weekends. And yet she would always be really sick the next day because she couldn't stop eating when she'd had enough. But when she learned to intuitive eat, she found that she felt like she had it all. She said she could go out and play and party with her friends and still feel great the next day. And she could enjoy all the food that she was eating. So it was definitely a win-win for her. So one of the examples that Jackie noticed as she was learning to intuitive eat was she was watching cats. And she said that she noticed that, finicky cats, well-fed cats who are taken care of, they can be finicky because they know that they're going to eat anytime they want to, right? So they turn their nose up at food all the time. But starving cats will eat anything, right? And the minute it's put in front of them, because they never know when their next meal is going to come. So even if they're full, they will keep eating because they don't know what's coming. So that's kind of how we are when we try to starve ourselves and think that we're going to be able to stop eating, right? So intuitive eating is that ability to take care of ourselves, know that we're going to have food whenever we need it, and we don't have to have everything that's in front of us. When I was dieting, if I had a certain amount of food that was allotted to me, right, a certain number of points or calories or a certain meal at a certain time, I was eating it, right? Regardless of whether I was full or whether I wasn't full, because I knew that it was my allotted amount. If I didn't eat that, I couldn't have anything else until the next time. And so there was no way I was passing it up. Or I would fill myself up with what was called 0 point foods or 0 calorie foods, trying to get myself to the next meal. Because if it wasn't time to eat, I could only starve myself, right? And so the only time I ever felt comfortable, emotionally comfortable, was if I was overly full, because it made me feel safer. Like, okay, I can get to the next meal because I'm full now, right? So it's really important that we learn to just honor that fullness, pay attention to it, and recognize it, and don't just pass it by. And again, if you choose at that moment to keep eating, that's totally fine. That's up to you. But we want to get to the point where we know what that point is and when we've crossed that point. Okay, principle number 6 is discover the satisfaction factor. I love this. To me, this is the whole point of intuitive eating, okay? There's a quote here on page 26. It says, when you eat what you really want in an environment that is inviting, the pleasure you derive will be a powerful force in helping you feel satisfied and content. By providing this experience for yourself, you will find that it takes much less food to decide you've had enough. Amen. I can totally attest to that, because it becomes a completely different experience. When you're binging and overeating, it's usually a very miserable experience, and it's to deal with emotional issues that are going on. When you have a pleasurable eating experience, you don't want to eat past the point of pleasure. When you're overeating, it becomes miserable. And so when we're focusing on pleasure and enjoying things, it's easy to stop when you've had enough, as long as you are really focused on giving yourself permission to eat and enjoying every bite that you have. It's one of the most powerful things I've learned about intuitive eating and having a healthy relationship with food. The example they gave was Denise, who worked on production sets, right? Now, production sets, they always bring in tons of catering food, lots of yummy food. And so she was always substituting diet food for the yummy food, hoping it would satisfy her as much, but it never does, right? I remember when I was dieting, eating rice crackers with peanut butter and raisins on it. and convincing myself that it was just as good as a candy bar. Bullcrap, right? That's nowhere near as good as a candy bar. So that you end up grazing and looking for what they call the phantom food, that one thing that's going to satisfy you, but nothing's going to satisfy you as much as the thing that you really wanted in the first place. So there's a great saying in the intuitive eating book that says, if you don't love it, don't eat it. And if you love it, savor it, enjoy it, enjoy every bite of it. You deserve that. So, I'm sure you've probably done that before. For me, if the family's eating ice cream, I remember my dieting days, they would be eating some decadent, wonderful ice cream that I love. And I would pull out my diet ice cream bar or something and try to eat it as slow as I could and tell myself in my head, oh, this is the same, but always feeling deprived, feeling, okay, they get to have the good stuff and I'm so fat or disgusting or whatever was in my head that I have to eat this less than thing, kind of pay my dues, right? And I ended up feeling deprived and usually ended up eating the good ice cream later anyway, and in more amounts than I would have ever eaten had I just had a small bowl of regular ice cream like the rest of the family, and enjoyed it. So the satisfaction factor is really important, and that is principle number 6. Okay, principle 7 is coping with your emotions without using food. And for me, this was the hardest one of all 10 because that's why I used food in the first place. So the 3 examples that they give in the book, this starts on page 27, is Marcia. She was a writer who relieved her tension about writing by constantly taking visits into the kitchen to get something to eat throughout the day, kind of procrastinating, distracting herself from the stress she was going through. There was Lisa, who was the 14-year-old who came home after school to watch TV and ate chips to procrastinate doing homework, right? As long as she could say she was hungry, her mom would let her stop and take a break instead of having to go straight for homework. But if she just wanted to watch TV, then that wasn't acceptable. So she was using food as a way to procrastinate doing her work. And then Cynthia, who couldn't work because of an illness, and her husband was busy all the time, and she was using food to numb her loneliness. So these are all situations that most of us can relate to. I feel like I could relate to all of them. I remember I would keep candy by my desk when I was working because constantly munching on that candy kept me distracted from the fact that I didn't want to be doing what I was doing. So it's like it was adding some sweet to the bitter, right? It was taking something I had to do and get done and just get me through it, right? Or maybe when my husband was traveling a lot and I took care of 4 kids all day long by myself, when I got them to bed, I would oftentimes get a treat because it felt like something nice I was doing for me because I was sitting there by myself and lonely or whatever. So using food to deal with emotions is a really common problem. Now, all of these women, as they learned to move to the intuitive way of eating, discovered that food never really tastes as good or as satisfying when they weren't really hungry. And so, or if they hadn't figured out what they wanted to eat, or if they were bolting down food without respect to how full they were. And so once you start developing that relationship where you recognize that you're really not getting the satisfaction you wanted to out of the food, it's easier to put that down. So the real trick is trying to figure out, what is it that you need? What is it that food is doing for you at that moment? Is it giving you distraction? Is it giving you pleasure, comfort? And find ways of giving yourself that in ways that will work and that won't have the negative side effects that aren't going to come with regrets, really. So that's principle number 7, is making sure that you cope with your emotions without using food. Principle number 8 is respecting your body. In this day and age, that can be really tough. We look at billboards and they tell us that if we're not a certain size or perfect shape, that we shouldn't love our bodies. But there's a great example in there. Andrea, age 50, she was putting down her body for not being younger and thinner like it used to be. And she had to learn how to respect her body and what it had done for her, the children it had born, and the ability to get her through her life. And she started learning to really respect herself and to stop comparing herself to others. The other example they gave was Janie, who was 25 years old. She was very fit, but she was always comparing herself to everyone else in the room to see, how fit was she compared to everyone else, and always felt like she was the biggest one in the room. And she was able to start making significant breakthroughs once she started to learn to focus on internal cues rather than external cues, and learning to trust herself and her own body. And that's when she started feeling better about herself. So, when do you find that you compare yourself to other people? And, rather than enjoying the moment, how do you get into that point where you're just comfortable in your own skin? How do you get to the point where you can just take care of yourself and love yourself and respect yourself and not worry about what other people think? One of my favorite phrases that a mentor of mine taught me was, what other people think of you is none of your business. And I really like that. It kind of helps me remember not to compare myself to other people or to worry about what other people think of me. Principle 9 is exercise, feel the difference. Exercise is important. We know for a fact that it's like the single most important thing to contributing to our health. And yet, because the world has turned it into a way just to get thin, they've turned it into drudgery. And when we really intuitively exercise, just like intuitive eating, we can actually love it and enjoy it. And because it feels so much better to have a healthy, strong, flexible body. But when we're just focused on the numbers, it really takes all the fun out of it, right? So it says shift from focusing on burning calories and losing weight to how it feels to move your body. Focus on how your body feels when it can move and when it can be strengthened, right? That feels really good. The example that they give in this part is Miranda, who had a gym membership, a treadmill, clothing, equipment, and never went to the gym. And when she discovered that she's actually liked basic movement and it stopped being about her weight, she found that she really enjoyed it and would do it more. So what is the exercise that you dread, right? And how many times have you done that in this effort to get thin, right? Do you hate running? Do you hate climbing stairs? Whatever it is. What exercise then feels good? What feels good to go do? Does it feel good to put your dog on a leash and go for a walk? Then go do that. Does it feel good to go play a game of racquetball with your friends? Does it feel good to stretch? Do that. So think about, what does it look like and feel like for you when exercise feels good, and do that and see how your body feels and how your body thanks you. So principle number 9 is just feel the difference in intuitive exercise. And principle number 10 is honor your health. And that's when we get to the gentle nutrition. And this is where a lot of people want to jump at the beginning, but until you have that healthy relationship with food, it's just going to turn into another diet for you. So you don't want to go there. But let's talk about what it is, what it's going to look like when we're there. On page 30, it says, make food choices that honor your health and taste buds while making you feel good, right? It's about progress, not perfection, is what counts. Progress, not perfection. So you want to honor your taste buds and your health. You don't eat something just because it's healthy for you, right? But you choose things that are healthy for you that you actually love as well. And again, this is something you do after you've developed that healthy relationship with food, where things stop becoming good and bad just because they are what they are. So here's the example they gave. Louise was cutting calories, still dieting, and she was still binging because she still felt deprived, right? And couldn't imagine why she couldn't stop. Well, she was still dieting. Learning to honor her taste buds and listen to her body with respect to how food made her feel was the key to getting out of that. So, so here's a good example. I have a daughter that has celiac disease. She has had constant stomach issues from the time she was really little. But, your taste buds like gluten, your taste buds like all that kind of stuff that her body really wasn't feeling good about, but they tasted good. So when she was really young and she got diagnosed with it, it's a long story, but she got diagnosed with it twice. So when she was younger, she got diagnosed with it, and it was really, really hard for her to stop listening to just her taste buds. And she was willing to feel physically miserable to keep eating those foods. As she got older, then the doctor thought she didn't have it and that he'd been mistaken, and she went back to eating gluten, and she got sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker. And finally, another doctor said, no, you definitely have it. Stop eating this. And by then she was mature enough to start saying, you know what, nothing is worth feeling this miserable for. And she started being able to say, okay, what can I eat that I do love that also will make me feel good, right? When she first was diagnosed with celiac, we were looking for like any kind of pizza that would, substitute for real pizza. We found out that there's like very little that doesn't taste like cardboard when you're looking for pizza. Now she's saying, okay, what can I have that I already love that is gluten-free, and I don't have to, worry about how I'm going to feel physically, and I can still enjoy it. So it's a complete turnaround from how she used to look at it. She was feeling very deprived before, and feeling like taste was everything. And now she's saying, you know what, taste is really important, and the way I feel is really important. And for her, that's how she found that balance. So the summary of this chapter basically is that each person learned the intuitive eating principles and used them and found a better quality of life and better resolution about how they wanted to eat and how they wanted to live their life. So, you kind of have to think about this for a minute take a spiritual sanity check and ask yourself if these principles, just these 10 principles that we've talked about, do they align with what you know to be true about how God created your body and what his intentions for your life are? For me, when I take a look at this list, it makes perfect sense, right? That God expects me to be able to listen to my own body and trust myself, that he created this body with all the right cues in it, and that I really didn't need other people to tell me what to eat or other programs to tell me what to eat. He wants me to learn to trust myself and listen to myself and care for my body. So that makes perfect sense. That incorporates honor my hunger. He's the one that gave me that programmed body. Making peace with food, right? No, I can't find anywhere where there are right and wrong foods. Basically, there's gentle nutrition that's explained in the Doctrine and Covenants, where we have wholesome herbs and grains and meat sparingly. But he doesn't go crazy telling you how much or when or what. He expects you to listen to your body. Making sure that you trust your own voice again, right? Getting rid of the challenging the food police and feeling your fullness, again, listening to your body. And movement. We know that movement is really important for our bodies. That's how God created us. The more we move, the more we can keep our fitness levels up, and the better we feel and the better quality of life we have. One of the problems with dieting is that it disconnects us from this body that Heavenly Father gave us. It's one of the greatest gifts he's given us. And when we diet, we get really disconnected from its signals and the things that it's trying to tell us. And I think that this intuitive eating is a way to get back in tune with that and to get back to where we honor and appreciate this body that we've been given. So I hope this, chapter has been interesting for you. We're going to be, as we go throughout the book, we'll cover each principle in more depth each week as we go into it and discuss how you can actually do that, how you can overcome some of the challenges that stand in the way. But this is a good overview to give you an idea of what intuitive eating really entails, and you can start practicing these principles now. Remember, it's not about perfection. It's just about progress. So I look forward to discussing this with you, and I will talk to you soon.